In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. These words are what started it all. Literally everything in the universe began with these words. That's why I worship God, through His creation. God's creation is a gift to us all. We just have to figure out the right ways to utilize and to learn from it. Many creatures and plants have specific and unique ways of life that go completely unnoticed by most. Yet, God still made them. That's why I love creation. God created everything with such detail, and it goes completely unseen. Something I've experienced firsthand is that creation is something that can bring people together. Did you actually? Okay. That can bring people together, and also is something that can reveal the true nature of God. The wilderness is somewhere that can show us our true natures as well, and it can be a humbling experience, making people realize that they are tiny and completely vulnerable. The effects the outdoors has on people is very significant, as there's many physical, mental, and socially positive effects that can completely change people's lives. For example, being alone in the wilderness is a great way to relieve stress, to find who you really are, and to think about and reflect on a lot of your problems in your life. The reduced distraction of the outdoors puts one in a place where they can speak to God one-on-one. People like Elijah in 1 Kings were alone, also Moses, were alone in the wilderness talking to God one-on-one for days at a time, giving them a chance to think about their next steps in life. This is something that I really value because the distraction and noise given by everyday life can sometimes pull modern Christians' focus away from God, and we should be able to create opportunities to reset that focus. That's why the outdoors is useful to Christians. It's a perfect place for a factory reset in your mind so that you can finally be able to learn who you really are and who God really is. So as I went through my capstone experience this year, I hope to change my views on my life, on God, and on others. So I feel spoiled. All my life I've been in a family that's been pretty much completely in love with the outdoors. And I've lived like an hour away from some of the tallest mountains in the continental U.S. But I've always loved spending time outside. I've always loved fishing or hiking or only just sitting outside on the porch just drinking an iced tea or lemonade. I've always loved that. I do realize that sometimes because of weather or like snow or rain, outdoors can be like unforgiving. But I've realized that because there's a lot of these bad parts of nature, it makes the good days that are like really nice even better than they actually are. And I've always had that kind of positive mindset. And I think my dad is right there. He's somebody who's taught me to think this way about the outdoors. Because he's actually a really negative person in real life, but he's got a great positive attitude about the outdoors.
I go there to reset.
Yeah, that's what he does. But for example, like when it's raining or when it's like cold out, he's always puts a positive spin on it. So it's like, oh, at least the grass is getting watered, or like the plants are gonna not die. And then we can just go have a root beer float on the porch and listen to the thunder and lightning. And I've always loved these kind of these memories I have, and I've begun to associate the outdoors with these. And I love that, and it's really good. But I've learned 3 things throughout my capstone experience. The first one, I've learned that the outdoors is actually better with those, to spend time out there with those you love. So that could be like your friends, your family. And it actually can strengthen or even fix some relationships. And I also learned that the outdoors can have a multitude of fantastic effects on your mental, your physical health, or even like your social life. And lastly, I felt a real change in my spiritual life. And I've wanted to go outside even more because of this. I mean, even when I was working on this capstone speech, I was like, dude, I'm wasting my time. I gotta get outside. But let's start with the first thing, the effects the outdoors has on your relationships. So in the first semester, our class went on a senior retreat up by Taylor Park Reservoir. That's in between Gunnison and Buena Vista. But that trip was awesome. I had been feeling down over the summer. I had been struggling with a lot of my self-worth during that time, and I didn't really feel accepted by my friends during that time because I I was the most unfunny person on the planet, pretty much. I tried to um, conform to what I thought my friends thought was funny, but I didn't really accept what my sense of humor really was. But I got to the campsite and I had brought my own tent, um, and I slept way far away from the huge group of boys that had set up a tent with all the friends in it. And I had another friend who was also feeling down over the summer, and we slept in the same tent together. We were able to talk for hours and hours at night, just telling each other, why we felt, excluded by our friends. But we actually realized that it was probably us during that time, because we were trying to be other people. But we were able to talk to our friends, and we decided to be ourselves during that time, and we were able to reconcile and fix our relationship with them, and it's been way better ever since then. And then everybody was happy. And it was probably one of the most influential parts of my life. Yeah, so on the same class trip, we were able to go hiking up a mountain. What the teachers call it is a summit, and this is I forget what the mountain was called, but it had no trail and nothing really made it easier. But it was just a 65-degree angle straight up the mountain, and it was really hard. I was feeling, it was really hot, it was really dry, I was really burnt out. And keep in mind, this is like 13,000 feet above sea level, so I couldn't breathe. But I had my friends. We were able to encourage each other, we were able to distract each other with the beautiful scenery. And there's something about the outdoors that really changes how you, I guess, work outside, and makes it actually easier when you have your friends around you and you can get an understanding with each other that really, you can help each other complete the mountain, I guess. So in the first semester, I was actually able to interview Mr. Spector, who's somebody who's not here, but I really respect, and he's a wonderful outdoorsman who he goes on crazy mountaineering trips in New Zealand with his brother. So on one of these trips, he's got the whole shebang. He's got the ice picks and the climbing gear and all the ropes and stuff. But this involved multiple days of hiking. And in one part of their hike, actually, never mind. They actually were able to have uninterrupted conversation for hours and hours on end, and just connect with each other for days at a time. And on particularly dangerous portions of the hike, they actually had to tie each other together tie themselves together with a long rope. So imagine these fingers are Mr. Spector and his brother. So they're going along this long ridge, this really thin ridge, right? And then so they had it set up so if one person fell off, then the other person should jump off and put the rope in between them like that. So it's kind of like a self-sacrifice thing for the other person. But I think this really mirrors how Christians should be with their religion, because through the crucifixion, Jesus was willing to die for us, but we should be willing to die for him. So Galatians 6:2 says, "Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ." We have to bear each other's burdens just like Christ did for us. In the first semester, I was also able to go on a hike with Noah and Davis. Right there. Cool guys over there. You should talk to them. We went hiking in Roxborough State Park. We did Carpenter Peak, which is a 6.5-mile hike. It's not too hard. It's it took us 2.5 hours or something. But we were able to speak to each other for that amount of time, with no distraction. We didn't have video games or I don't know if we had cell service, but we didn't really have that kind of thing to be distracted with. But we were able to talk to each other, and I could tell them things that I hadn't really told them before, and it was actually a really deep conversation that we were able to take part in. But the next Saturday, I actually did the same hike all by myself without Noah and Davis, and it was actually, the hike felt empty. It felt way more difficult, and I think there's a reason for that. In any sport, there has to be some kind of trust and friendship in that sport, but some kind of trust and friendship in that sport, and you have to be able to encourage each other as you're going, to succeed pretty much. And that's basically what we did. And it actually made it way easier for us to climb the mountain when I did it with my friends. So when we got to the mountain, Noah said, actually, we're already here. And then he talked about like, oh, we should go on another hike with more friends and stuff. But I learned that it's way better to actually be spending time outside with your friends than it is to be alone. That's why I think the senior retreat was so fantastic, because I was able to do that. The second thing I learned was how the outdoors can mentally change people. I've never really felt like anxiety or depression in my life, but I did. I was able to do some research on why I think the outdoors can like help those feelings of anxiety or depression, and it actually has to do with a lot of like your serotonin levels, your vitamin D levels, and your cortisol levels, and it also has to do with like the sound of nature. It's a whole bunch of weird stuff, but vitamin D is something that's produced by the skin only when you go out in the sun, and if you don't go in the sun enough, you can actually get a vitamin D deficiency, which that can actually lead to anxiety or depression, but it can also lead to like even like long-term health effects, like even some kind of cancers and some like MS too. And cortisol is also a naturally occurring hormone in the body that is actually lowered. Is a naturally occurring hormone in the body that kind of regulates the fight or flight response in your body, but it can actually go way out of whack and that's how anxiety and depression are usually caused. But it's actually recommended to spend time in the outdoors with that nature, like this actual sound of like birds or like waves or some kind of nature sound. It's actually recommended and proven to help to be have that sound for 20 minutes per day. And I was able to actually put this kind of into practice on the senior solo. We had, what the senior solo is like, we were to go out in the wilderness for 6 to 8 hours, all alone, with pretty much nothing. We had no phones, no way to talk to anybody. Some people absolutely hated it, but I absolutely loved it. I could just sit there and sort out my problems, so my friendships, my relationships, but it was only me, the birds, the trees, and the wind, and it just felt calm and peaceful. And I just wanted to stay there forever, pretty much. I was able to interview my pastor, who said who's really into biking, really long distances. So he goes from like sea to sea, and he said that his soul breathes when he's out in the wilderness biking. And that's exactly how I felt during the solo. I learned that if I'm ever like stressed, solitude is really important. It is great to have your friends, as I talked about earlier, in the wilderness, but you do definitely need a little bit of solitude, just so you can be able to slow down, get rid of the distractions in your everyday life. And I also learned during that solo that God can change people through the outdoors. And since I was told to stay put, I could see all these little details around me that I thought were absolutely beautiful. So I could see like the droplets of sap, the sound of the wind, and the ants in their little dens, and all the intricate bark formations and stuff, and the squirrels and the weasels. I just had a place where I could just stop and think about how powerful God actually is, and I could revel in that power. But I also learned that God to speak to you in nature. So I was able to interview, as I talked about earlier, Mr. Spector, who's hiking in New Zealand. He's hiking with his brother. He's freezing. He's burnt out. The snow is twice as deep as the knee, and it's taking twice as long to go through this hiking trip. and he was like he could not continue on. He's but he had to basically put his trust in God to continue on. And I think that's really interesting because God can speak to you in your lowest point, and it's actually really difficult to have that conversation with God and actually slow down. And when you're in the city, it's really hard to slow down and just actually talk to God. But that's why I think the solo was so great, because I was able to do that. And I think that it was amazing how my family has always been brought up in the way it has, because it's introduced me to the outdoors, and my family understands that the outdoors can change people and it can really help you in your life in the future. And that's why I want to spend my life outdoors forever and ever. So there it is. Speech done.
Yeah.